Number 3 of the Green Mountain Mornings program underway on this Tuesday, February the 7th. Your host, Chris Lenois, joining me now in the studio for our regular Tuesday conversation about things happening here in the community and covered by your hometown daily newspaper, the Brattleboro Reformer, is staff reporter for the Reformer, Chris Mays. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Nice to have you in here. And of course, in addition to the print edition, people can see Chris's writing online at reformer.com. I really rely on the online edition for these Tuesday conversations because I get up before the paper is delivered to my house. So I can see what stories that you have with your byline on it on a Tuesday. And there is an important one this morning having to do with the Brattleboro school budget. And talk a little bit about this because the headline, School Budget Warning Misleading. How did this story come about for you?
Well, I talked to the school board chairwoman, Jill Stahl-Tyler, and she told me about how the pupil, the per equalized pupil rate is a lot different than the actual student count. And they're required to put in the warning how much per equalized pupil spending is going to increase from the last year. So at first glance, it looks like almost 11%.
Right. That's what the warning says. When people, if people are representatives of town meeting or if people are going and picking up the packet just because they're interested and they want to talk to their town meeting representative about how to vote on the $14.5 million school budget for the town of Brattleboro, is this the first line in the warning that you quoted? And I'll read it. Quote, this projected spending per equalized pupil is 10.9% higher than spending for the current year. Is that how the warning begins?
I don't think so. I think it's the next line with the budget number, which is, 14.5 million or whatever.
Right.
And then it tells you how much each equalized pupil.
Yeah. It's such a mouthful.
But so an equalized pupil is weighted differently than an actual student,
Right.
And it depends on things like their socioeconomic background and their ability to speak the English language. Things like that go into how these rates are created for each community.
Yeah. We had Jill Stahl-Tyler on the program here a couple of weeks ago, right after Phil Scott proposed that moving the school budget back to May 23rd, the vote on the school budget as people tried to level fund their budgets. And she was going through some of this equalized pupil count to try and explain why. The bottom line for Brattleboro voters is the tax rate on assessment for school budget is actually going down this year.
Yeah, 0.4%, and that's because they anticipated that this rate would fluctuate. So they're going to apply $130,000 from a reserve fund that they put some money into last year when Jill said, that we knew this number was out of whack, and it was because the equalized pupil number is going down by 10%, I think it is, and
right.
And the actual student count is going down by one student.
One student, yeah, they've lost one student from last year to this current year. That's fascinating when you think about some of the stories that are happening in the state. So, yeah.
It is.
Worth checking out Chris's story in this morning's paper and reading it carefully before you talk to your representative of town meeting, or if you're a town meeting rep, because you're going to see this about the rate 10.9% higher when actually the number is almost 10% lower than last year's budget. And the bottom line is tax rate expected to go down by almost 0.5%. $14.5 million budget. A little bit lower. Is there anything more to say about the school budget? I wanted to make sure because I want to move on to another story that you did about the town meeting warnings for the municipal budget.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. These are really complicated monetary descriptions. for me. And you're getting pretty good at this stuff at this point with this sort of thing. But with regards to the town of Brattleboro and that budget, that was all approved at a special meeting last week, right? The warnings for representative town meeting on the budget and some other articles, right?
Yeah, the night before the school warning, yeah.
And they've done their best to try and keep the tax rate level for the municipal budget as well. Is that going up at all? I think it's like a 0.5% or not even 0.5%, like a decimal point percent.
Yeah, they're taking a bigger chunk out of the surplus than they normally would to kind of help with some of the capital projects they got going on, especially with the police and fire project.
Right, and this people can go back to your article Thursday. Brattleboro Select Board approves town meeting warnings, talking about taking almost $1.1 million from the unassigned fund balance to apply it to the operating and capital expenses for the coming fiscal year. But there's going to be a couple other things that people are going to have to vote on town meeting day and then the representative town meeting. Now, they're going to have to choose from the different candidates running for select board, and there are 4 running for 2 seats, and I'm sure you'll see. You've already done a couple of interviews. You've done Tim.
I have 2 more to go.
And 2 more to go? Yeah, same here.
Brandy.
Yeah, we've both spoken with Tim Wessels and Brandy Starr. David Cadron coming on my program Thursday. And then we're both still trying to get in touch with Avery Schwenk. Avery, if you're out there listening, the media wants to speak with you. But these other stories these other issues that people are going to have to vote on. One being plastic bags. And we've talked about this before. Tell people a little bit about this plastic bag ban.
Well, some people in town are trying to get a ban on single-use plastic bags, which would be in retail stores and food restaurants, I guess.
Does this, if it passes, I got to think this is going to require further definition on where these plastic bags are allowed and where they're not allowed. I mean, I'm thinking about the plastic bags you put your produce in at the grocery store. Is there a ban on that, or is it just the bag that they do at the checkout line? I mean, have they discussed this in select board to figure out how they're going to define it and how they're going to enforce it?
No, but the article is to advise the select board to do something about it. But my guess would be the select board would have the planning commission discuss it and come up with an ordinance and then bring it back to the board.
Right. Interesting that this is coming up as a general vote on town meeting day. In other words, the March 7th date, not the representatives of town meeting. Any idea what the thinking is behind that?
No, I actually don't. I think it's just so the residents have a say. It's going to affect a lot of people, I think.
I wonder if there's another layer where it has to go to representative town meeting after this, or exactly how that works within our town charter, to me, is still a question mark. One thing to point out, and you point this out in your story, it does not interfere with the pay-as-you-throw system, where people buy plastic bags to throw their trash away. The other thing that people are going to vote for or against on March 7th has to do with this compassionate city designation. Talk a little about what is this compassionate city designation?
Well, there's this organization that came out a few years ago, and their whole goal is to network with different communities, sharing information and supporting different causes and groups, and just becoming more of a compassionate community throughout the country.
Does the designation, like I'm thinking about a downtown, historic district or something, that affords you certain grant opportunities, things like that? What does being designated a compassionate city do for Brattleboro? Anything?
I think they'll just be part of a bigger network.
Okay.
But within Brattleboro, there'll be different meetings and activities around being this compassionate city.
Yeah. And they've done a lot of work to get signatures on the petition to get that on the ballot March 7th. So some important questions for Brattleboro voters, important questions really for every town on town meeting day. We will get to some of those with Chris Mays, as well as some other stories he's been covering for the Brattleboro Reformer after the bottom of the hour news break. Stick around. 28 degrees outside at 20 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Chris Lenois, your host of the Green Mountain Mornings program, and Chris Mays of the Brattleboro Reformer here in the studio, just waiting for the snow to fall. That's all we're doing now. Anything coming out? I got my back to the window, and I saw you looking out the window, Chris. Is it snowing?
Yes, it is.
All right. An extra smile on Chris Mays' face because of the snow, because he's a snowboarder. Are you hitting the slopes later today?
Not today,
No.
but probably tomorrow.
Yeah, a busy day for you today, starting here in the morning and then ending with the Brattleboro Select Board meeting later on tonight. Kind of a full day. Appreciate you coming in at this hour to talk about some of the stories you've been working on in the past week for the Brattleboro Reformer. Now, you had a story in last week's paper and Friday's paper about a member of the Wilmington Select Board resigning, Diane Chapman, submitting her letter of resignation. But we actually have to go back a couple of weeks before to give context to this resignation story for Diane Murphy, because it has to do with the town manager, Scott Murphy. So maybe we need to remind people, I don't think you and I had a chance, because I know that Mike Fair sat in for you a couple of weeks in a row. Scott Murphy basically said at the end of his current contract, he's done. He's going to retire as the town manager, and that's still like over a year away.
Yeah. So the select board is concerned that he's not going to do the job that they want him to do because he's just going to be biding his time, basically.
Right. His contract runs out in 2018, and he said, I'm not going to get a new contract. Is he an older gentleman? I mean, is this a retirement situation?
No, he has plans to enter into a new job.
Okay.
He doesn't have anything on the table right now, but he does plan to continue working.
Okay, so he was just going to stop being town manager for Wilmington. He wasn't retiring per se.
Yeah, I guess it came up in talks because the contract was set to expire. So I guess through conversation, he decided he wasn't going to pursue another contract.
Right. So he made this announcement sometime in, I want to say, right at the beginning of 2017 in January. And then the select board said, would you mind retiring early, or would you mind leaving earlier than your contract? Why did they ask him to do that?
They asked him to consider it because they were concerned that he wouldn't be doing the job that needed to be done, I guess.
How long has Scott Murphy been town manager in Wilmington?
I think he started right after the flood.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's been there a while.
Yeah, he's been there for as long as I have, a little more longer than I have been at the Reformer.
What reason, I'm asking a very loaded question here, and I don't want to get you in trouble, but what reason would they have to think he would just sit there and not carry out the duties of his office for the next year, based on the fact that he's been there that long and he's basically giving them notice? But why are they so concerned about him staying on till 2018? Do they have reason to believe? Is there personality conflicts? What exactly led some members of the select board to doubt Scott Murphy would not carry out the duties of his office for the next 12 months?
The select board chairman, Tom Fitzgerald, did cite some personality conflicts between the board and Scott.
Yeah. Can you think of any when you've been at meetings? I mean, you've been covering the Deerfield Valley for a while. Have there been times where you've seen members of the Wilmington Select Board clash with Scott Murphy?
No, that's why the announcement was kind of a surprise to me.
Yeah, I mean, I read your stuff each and every week, getting ready for these conversations. I can't remember a time where you've ever reported some sort of disagreement between the board and the town manager. No,
and for a little while I thought it might have been this Look Road Bridge replacement project. They ran into a deficit of $400,000, and they're going to have to bring it up to the voters in a separate article. Usually they put money into a reserve fund for bridge repairs and infrastructure like that. But this year they're going to have a separate article just to get that $400,000 for this bridge project, and I thought that might have been at play here, but not anymore. I really don't think that was the issue.
Okay, and so now jumping ahead to the story that you reported on last week with Diane Chapman submitting her resignation, she clearly doesn't agree with asking Scott Murphy to leave early. This is the reason she's leaving the board, was how Scott Murphy was treated, she told you.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a full agreement on the board. I'm not sure who's for it and who's against it exactly, but I know right now lawyers for Murphy and the town are looking at how he might leave early.
Right. So there's not been a formal vote by the select board as far as saying, we want you to leave early. I don't even know if that's in the power of a select board to actually take a vote and say, we want you to leave earlier than the end of your contract. It seems to me like Scott Murphy is amenable to trying to leave early to honor that request. Is that your sense?
Yeah, he said he was looking at options.
Okay, and he seems fine with that.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, is it for Chapman, the select board member who's leaving? It seems to me that it's about two things. It's not only about them asking Murphy to leave as town manager, but also the way it was handled.
Yeah, and the way that it's going now with lawyers involved and the cost to the town. And she felt she was left out of the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you mentioned in your story from last Friday. Chapman was away visiting grandchildren out of state when the board held 2 executive sessions on this issue without her. Does she think that was intentional?
I don't know that.
She didn't go that far.
No, she didn't say that.
But they held these executive sessions on the board meeting, or excuse me, on the town manager while she was absent. And so they made this decision to ask him to leave early, and she wasn't present.
Yeah.
Okay. So where does this go from here as far as what's the next steps?
Well, I think they talked about having a special election and seeing who might be interested in taking the position, because it's too late now to be a part of town meeting in March. So
right, for Chapman and
to replace her, right?
Right, yeah. And Murphy will likely be the town manager at least through this town meeting season. There's no way they could get him out and get somebody else in this short period of time. They're not looking to fill it that quickly.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I think he was planning to stay on board for town meeting because he wants to help with that bridge issue I discussed earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that you wrote about, and this was in the weekend section from the town of Wilmington, has to do with a lawsuit being filed by somebody from out of state, New Jersey resident Thomas Reck. What was interesting to me about this, well, first of all, the details about why he's suing. He's suing both the town of Wilmington and the town of Dover.
We don't exactly know why right now. We just know that there is a lawsuit.
Okay. And we know that he was arrested while in the Deerfield Valley for having a blood alcohol content of 0.138%. That's over the legal limit.
Yeah.
Right. And he had a 11-year-old son in the car at the incident. The thing that I found curious about this, when there are lawsuits against a town, these are things that are usually talked about in executive session, not disclosed during the public portion of the meeting. That I'd have never, unless it really gets to a certain level. Did that strike you as odd that this was being talked about during the public portion of the meeting, especially since they don't know anything about it yet, really?
Well, not really. When it came up, I just looked at it as, okay, they're making the announcement. It's public. But then when I started asking for details to confirm different things that I heard, I was kind of, I didn't get the information I wanted. I wanted to know the officers and
right.
What they were being sued for, and I didn't get that yet, and I couldn't get it at the civil court either. So we're still waiting to look at the document.
Well, the DUI arrest is almost 4 years old now. This happened in October of 2013. So
yeah, he's not on probation anymore either.
Yeah,
so
we'll have to wait another 4 years to see exactly what comes of this, if at all. I found that curious that it was all being talked about out in the public, even though they couldn't really talk about much about it. So I just wanted to get some clarification from you about that. Also wanted to ask you about the story you wrote that was in yesterday's Reformer regarding the town of Dover looking at faster broadband. And this is specifically Dover, right? I mean, a lot of these things that are being done jointly between Dover and Wilmington and some of the surrounding towns when you're talking about economic development. This request for proposal for high-speed internet service and Fairpoint Communications being the only one to respond to it is specifically for Dover?
Yes.
Okay.
For the whole town, East Dover, West Dover.
Okay. And tell us a little about, they've proposed 2 plans to implement high-speed internet?
Yeah, both just over $4 million. One would have the town paying for the network build-out, they call it, and the other completely for the build-out, and that would make things cheaper on the customer. But if they paid 90% of the build out, then it would be a little more expensive for the customer, businesses and homes in Dover.
Right. You reference the 1% local option tax. Is that used? Can that be used for this kind of endeavor? Is that in play here?
I think so. It fits the purpose of the fund for them. I think it's just a matter of how they're going to present it I think it might go to town meeting or it might come up to a vote with the select board about how to fund it, if it's going to be a one-time shot or if it's going to be paid over time. I'm not sure all those details yet.
Right. Well, I got to think that they have to ask the town at some point, probably through the town meeting process, which plan they would prefer. Because as you point out in your story, depending on whether they choose option A or option B, it affects the people in the town in terms of what they're paying for the service, right?
Yeah, and it's not on the town meeting warning, and I think they had 90 days to respond to this RFP, so I'm not sure if it will go to town meeting or how it's going to play out. I just know that the economic development director said they're discussing how it will be funded.
I hadn't thought, yeah, right. The articles are already warned probably, or the deadline is passed because it's past February 1. They may have to hold a special town meeting to try and get input from the public and public hearings and all that kind of process.
And it's possible too, because it's a big project and it could mean big things for people.
Yeah, well, and it's something that they want. I would imagine most people in that town have been clamoring for broadband service. That's certainly one of the big things that I hear from the people running from that area, whether it's Laura Sibilia or John Gannon in this case. And it's interesting that it's just Dover that is getting this proposal, not something for the Deerfield Valley. Do they have $4 million in that local option tax fund, or is this something that they'd still kind of have to figure out how to pay for?
I think that they would. I think they do because they get a lot of revenue because with the mountain there.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I don't. It would definitely be the biggest expenditure from that fund, and
they get big. They get big receipts from there sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. That local options tax has done a
Certain
lot
parts of the year
for the Mount Snow Valley, and good for them. We'll have to see what happens with that. We'll look forward to Chris Mays writing about that in the Brattleboro Reformer at future dates. Other things coming up with your byline you want to tease before I let you go?
Yeah, we're going on a tour of the Green Street School today to talk about the heating system improvements that are proposed at town meeting. So that's almost $1 million project. So
all right, so you get to walk through a school.
Yeah.
All right. That should be fun. Thanks for coming on this morning, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Chris Mays, staff reporter for the Brattleboro Reformer, online at reformer.com. We will be back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings right after these messages.